Okay, I can see it. All right, good morning, everyone. I hope that you went to bed thinking about the ABLLS all night and how many ABLLS you were going to do and how excited you are about the ABLLS. In case anyone's joining us new today or late, my name is Marilyn Green and I'm one of the behavior analysts for the board. And today I have Jen Naradka with me, who is also a behavior analyst. Hi, everyone. And so what we are going to do today is we're going to do a quick little recap from yesterday. So basically yesterday what we did was, well, actually first we're going to do a little introduction and prayer. I'm sorry, I'm off. So we'll do our prayer, we'll do our introductions, and then we'll do a little recap. Jen, do you want to lead us today?
Sure, if you could join me in prayer, that would be great. Please feel free to mute your microphone and turn off your video for the presentation. We are recording this for future use, so if your video is on, you might be on video. Okay, so if you would join me in prayer, in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Ever-present God, you called us to be in relationship with one another and promised to dwell wherever 2 or 3 are gathered. In our community, we are many different people who come from many different places, have many different cultures. Open our hearts that we may be bold in finding the riches of inclusion and the treasures of diversity among us. We pray in faith. Amen.
Thanks, Jen. All right, so we are going to do a little bit of a review. So here are some of the materials that we gave you yesterday. Again, if you haven't had the chance to print them, a scrap paper will do, but if you have had a chance, this is what you can do with them. So if you have your ABLLS book with you, or if you have one, it would be a good resource to have with you today. A pencil and paper, so you can scratch note a lot of these things. You can take some notes along the way. The yellow and red marker was mostly for yesterday, so you should be all right without that today. In your Google folder, though, you do have the PDF slides, so if you did print those, that's great. You do have an ABLLS grid, so this is an electronic grid that if you want to make a copy of it and start filling one in when you do your own ABLLS, that's what you can use that for. We also provided you with a detailed summary sheet. Now, that's something that you might want to have even open on your computer today, because what it does do is it does give you a list of all the ABLLS goals at least, so you could reference them as we're speaking about them. We have the assessment checklist, which we're going to go over today, and you have the data sheets for all the common starter skills, which you won't need the data sheets today, but you'll have them for the future. All right. So yesterday Jen did, she went through dipping your toe in, doing an ABLLS, wading in slowly, or diving right in. So yesterday we did a little dip our toe in about like, what if you already have an ABLLS grid? How can you read that? How can you obtain one of those from parents? Wading in slowly, we started to talk about the idea of looking at different ABLLS goals and how we could use those goals to help guide our IEP goals and how we could use them as an assessment tool for that. And then today we're going to dive right in with 10 different starter goals. So we did choose these goals for you. Of course, you can choose other goals, but we'll tell you along the way why we chose these specific goals. So first, what I want to do is open up the table. Were there any questions yesterday that were pressing or that came up that weren't answered or that you thought about last night and you might want us to answer for you? I'm going to rely on Jen here to look in the chat box.
There's nothing in the chat box yet, but perhaps if Louise Crossan wouldn't mind hopping on, because she had a really good question and come to her yesterday, and she has an answer. She's an itinerant resource teacher with our department.
Thanks, Louise.
Good morning, Marilyn and Jen.
Morning.
So yesterday in the chat, somebody had asked the question, or it came up about using kindergarten program expectations, and are we able to modify students' programming to the kindergarten program level? So I said I would investigate, and I did. So the answer is not clear-cut. The kindergarten program is a 2-year program, and the Ontario curriculum is from grades 1 to 8 at the elementary level. So not all of the expectations move evenly from the kindergarten program to the curricular areas. So many of the things, because of the type of play-based programming they have in kindergarten, may fit on what we would call alternate pages. And so it's not you wouldn't put on an alternate page that an expectation is kindergarten modified because it's alternate. There are, however, some specific, maybe literacy and numeracy areas that could be seen as equating to the grade 1 to 8. So at that time, you may be able to, but the short answer is no, you don't know never, but it's not yes always. It would be on a case by case. It would be what is best for the needs of the student. And what you would do is you would have a team meeting. So like the resource teacher, the classroom teacher, your principal, and then you may want to, it's suggested, best practice would be to reach out to your spec ed consultant, and you may want to include the itinerant resource teacher in that, because what you're looking at is the assessment of the student, the needs of the student, and how you can best marry those together. And so that would always be on an individual basis. It would never be a blanket statement.
Okay. Thank you so much, Louise, for that.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other questions popping up, Jen?
There aren't any other questions, so I think we can just dive in.
Okay, so I'm gonna lead today, and Jen is gonna monitor the chat box. She'll answer any questions along the way that might be answerable just by chatting. And then if there's anything pressing, she will bring it up for the whole group. Okay, so we're gonna start with an activity right off the hop because we have a lot to do today. So yesterday we talked a lot about how the ABLLS can help you determine a progression. So how it can help you determine what some of the prerequisite skills are for teaching one of the skills in the curriculum. So if I gave you this list of skills, what I would like you to do in the chat box is tell me which skill of these would you teach first. So I'm going to read them out for you. Labels, features, or parts of items that are missing or incorrect. So that might be if I gave you a picture of a chair that was missing a leg, can you identify that leg is missing, or that part of the leg? Receptive parts of objects. So if I show you a dog, can you say ears, nose, tail? Labels, oh, sorry, that's receptive. Can you say, when I say, where is the nose, you can point to the nose. When I say, where are the ears, you can point to the ears. Labels parts of object is labeling those. So nose, ears, tail. Request what's missing. So if I gave you a piece of paper and said, write a sentence, and you had no pencil, could you say, I need a pencil, please? And receptive parts of objects in a larger picture would be if I gave you a scene with a car, a child, and a swing, could you say, when we say, where's the swing, you can point to the swing. So in the box, which one would you teach first?
So a lot of people, Marilyn, are saying receptive parts of objects.
Okay.
So the second one.
Okay.
Some people are saying label objects.
Okay.
So it's pretty much mixed between receptive and labeling.
Okay. So what we're going to do is the ABLLS does the work for you. So when you have an ABLLS book, you can look up these things. So you're right, receptive parts of object, it's a seagull. So it does come technically first. So first we need the student to be able to identify before a label what the different parts of an object are. Next, we want them to, again, identify before being able to label the parts of objects in a larger picture. So once you understand that one object has multiple parts, can you then understand that within a scene, there's multiple parts? Then we move to G, which is labeling. So once you can receptively identify it, can you then say this is the part and label that part? And the same with that for parts of a scene. And then and only then would we start to teach requests for missing items. So as you know, we teach requesting very early, but what we want to make sure that we do is typically we teach requesting with the item present. And so this is a much higher level skill of being able to assess the situation, know there's multiple parts of that scene, identify the part of the scene that's missing, and then request it and have the motivation to request it. So what the ABLLS does is it helps you break down that if you were trying to teach something like request missing items, what are those prerequisite skills that would be needed? So as you can see, the ABLLS doesn't necessarily go in a progression of C and then F and then G. C is our receptive skills, G is our labeling skills, and then F is being able to request that. So it's not always in the progression of C, D, E, F, G, but what we want to make sure is first the student can receptively identify it, then they can label it, and then they can ask for it. Is there any questions about that one? We're going to do multiple, and we'll do another one together as well. Okay. So the next one is we've given you an example from the ABLLS for each of these. So if you had these 3 learning goals, follow routines instructions, which might mean when you say sit down, the child sits down. Do an enjoyable action out of context. So if you were sitting at the table doing some work and you said, go jump on the trampoline, can they go and do that? And then do an enjoyable action in context would be while you're sitting on the swing, you say, go ahead and swing. So you're already in context. Or if you're standing on the trampoline, you say, jump. So you're already in a fun context. Can they receptively do that? So for this one, which one would you think comes first? Now, if you have your ABLLS book, you could start to look some of these up in your ABLLS book. And normally what we would do in our live presentation is we would give these to you and help get you to sort them in a group. So it's a little bit more difficult doing this online, but which one would we teach first?
Everyone in the chat box is agreeing that we would start with number 3, do an enjoyable action in context.
Right, absolutely. So it's much easier for a student to be already engaged with something and say, go ahead and do this. They're already probably about to do it. It's something that they would be more likely to do anyways. You've already got that motivation. What would be the next one we would teach?
So a lot of people are saying 2 would come next.
Right.
Do an enjoyable action out of context.
Right, and then we're following routines. So again, the ABLLS does this for you. C2, C6, C9. It labels for you what the progression of skills would be. So it's definitely easier for a learner to follow an action when they're already engaged in that activity. Next, we want to see, can they pause the activity they're currently in, go do a brief action, come back? And then we get into following routines instructions, which might not have the motivation. We might need an external motivator for that. So that's why the first 2 are here. Any questions on that progression? We're going to do multiple examples with you.
There aren't any questions yet, but I do want to point out that oftentimes we are trying to teach students to follow routine instructions, like line up at the door and take out your math book. And there are so many routine instructions that our neurotypical students follow quite well in the classroom. And that's because, again, they're motivated by social reinforcement. They're motivated by the teacher's smile, the teacher's approval, their peers' approval. So they are getting reinforcement. They're not getting a token or a sticker or a candy or anything, but they are getting a source of reinforcement for following routine instructions. And sometimes our kiddos who might not be as motivated by social praise or approval, they don't have a built-in reinforcer. So really going back in the earlier C skills helps us teach them to follow our instructions, but when it's highly likely or much more likely for them to do so. So if you're stuck at a C9 type of skill that you're trying to teach a student, let the ABLLS help you jump back a little bit, because there is a progression there of some prerequisite skills.
And as we were saying yesterday, some of those baseline skills that we teach are imitation and language. And imitation is something that we often use as a prompt. So a good webinar to go watch would be our prompting and prompt fading webinar here. But something like follows a routine instruction. All the other students are not only using the prompt of a model, which is imitation of the student or the teacher going to line up, then they watch all the other students and they're like, oh, I should be going there too. Whereas if our student doesn't have imitation skills, that model is not going to be effective. So we do have to teach our C skills.
We do have a question, Marilyn. Sorry.
Yes.
So feel free to ask the group the question or to privately message me the question. So some of the questions came in that way yesterday, which is great. And that's how some of them are coming in now, which is fine. Someone's asking the best way to teach follow receptive instructions or following routine instructions. Would it be to put it into a game, like follow the leader? And my response was that no, the most effective evidence-based way to teach a skill like that is to use an ABA practice. So we would give the instruction, prompt the student from behind, so we're out of their visual field, so we're not holding their hand or leading them over, and not say anything else. So as soon as the instruction is given by the teacher, the EA would not then repeat the instruction. The EA would go behind the student and prompt them to follow the routine, and then be the one to deliver an additional reinforcer when they get to that location. So if it's line up at the door, the EA might have some of their favorite things, or the teacher might have some of their favorite things, prompting the student from behind and then reinforcing them. I love the way you came to line up at the door, paired with more of a tangible reinforcer or an edible reinforcer for your student if they're not motivated by social.
And then plan to fade those prompts as soon as possible once the student has become successful. Because what we don't want is for every time the student hears go line up, that they just stand there and wait for that physical prompt to come up behind them. Once we start to feel that they're going on their own, we're going to fade those prompts. And that's how you get to the independence. And what you're going to see when you're going through a lot of these ABLLS goals is they are not ABLLS goals with prompts. They are ABLLS goals that are mastered at an independent level. So the levels are different. Can they do 2? Can they do 3? Can they do 4 minutes? Can they do 5 minutes? But you'll see that almost all of them are at an independent level. So our goals, when we write them, can do this independently.
And Marilyn, can you just touch on what we touched on yesterday? I'm getting another question in the chat box about why simply using modeling of the other students or the EA modeling the behavior isn't enough for a lot of our students to effectively learn the skill.
Right, so what we would want to do first before we use a model prompt is we would want to prompt the D skills. So can the student imitate a simple motor action? So do this, can they do that? When we ask them to do multiple motor actions, can they imitate that? If so, then we may in fact be able to use a model prompt. But however, most of our students that we work with, when we start probing those skills, we see that they're not actually very strong in the imitation skills. There's multiple reasons for that. That they're not developing at the same level, or they need to be explicitly taught those skills and they haven't explicitly been taught them. What happens with a developing toddler is they have those skills developing at such a young age, they start to model, or they start to follow models, and they're so heavily reinforced for it. So what we have to do is go back and teach imitation skills with our students, or we need to use, as Jen was saying, those like general physical prompts so that we can get them following receptive instructions a little bit quicker. And I mean, likely I would be doing those things in tandem, because we do want your student to know those imitation skills, because that's one of those behavioral cusps. Once they start imitating you and peers, they're going to be learning a lot more skills quickly. However, in the meantime, we still need to follow routine instructions and simple motor instructions. So we'll be using our physical prompts for that. Do you have anything else to add, Jen?
Nope, that's great.
Okay, so we're going to go on to our next example. So this example has touch a common item. So if I say touch pen, they touch the pen. Look at a reinforcer. So I'm holding the ball and I say, look, and the student looks at the ball. So that I used ball as an example, but this would be whatever is reinforcing for your student. Pick reinforcer from 2 reinforcers. So I've got chocolate and bubbles, and I say, choose one. Select object from 3 objects. So when presented on the table, you've got a duck, a pen, and a paper. You say, show me the pen, and they touch the pen or they select the pen. Pick reinforcer from 2 items. So we'll touch the ball when presented with the ball and pen upon request. So I'm like, I have 2 favorite items, and I say, touch the ball. Touch a reinforcer. So the student, you have chocolate in front of them, and you say, touch the chocolate. Can they just touch that one item? Select pictures from 3 pictures. So that's the same as the objects. However, it would be pictures. So you've got a picture of a ball, a picture of a pen, and a picture of a lamp. And you say, touch the lamp, and the student can identify that. Notice that a lot of these skills are within multiple items. So it's within 2. As you see it go further up, it's within we call it a visual field. So how many items are in front of you? 5, 6, and it goes up higher. Pick object from 2 objects. So when presented with a pen and a paper, we say, pick the pen, and they can pick the pen. So looking at these skills, which one do you think you would teach first?
So most people are already responding, Mayor, and it's a mix between look at a reinforcer and touch a reinforcer.
Okay. Is there any other question or any other ones there? Just a mix of those two?
No, it's just the mix of those two right now so far.
Okay, so the ABLE does it for you again. So looking at a reinforcer is C3. So it's a very easy skill. They don't have to go out and do this. It's just look and they just orient towards it. And it doesn't even have to be like, you know, lengthy eye contact. It's just they orient towards that item. And we're holding that item up for them. So there's no selection of it, right? The next skill is it's very similar. So it's now touch that thing that you really like, but we actually might have to physically prompt the touch if we're teaching what that touch means. Touching a common item. So less reinforcing, so a little bit harder of a skill. And then as you see, it's going to start to progress up. So now you're picking between 2 items and between 3 items, and then it'll go up further between 4 and 5. The reason object is an earlier skill than picture is because it's less abstract. We see, we feel those objects, we've played, you know, they've often played with those objects or manipulated those objects, whereas a picture is a little bit more abstract. It's not that object right in front of you. So first we teach object and then we teach picture. Are there any questions on that progression? Does that make sense to you?
Yes, this is great. And I love how we're showing that the ABLLS, like one comment was that the ABLLS is doing the work for us. So we don't actually have to do all the hard work. We can find a skill and then use the ABLLS to go backwards or go forwards for next steps or see where we're missing previous steps.
So here's an example. Oh, sorry.
So I did have another question coming in. Does something like looking at a reinforcer or touching a reinforcer help develop joint attention or teach joint attention? So my response was that yes, because it helps when you can look at a reinforcer under the instructional control. So think about the ABA in your classroom sessions that we did with Robert Schramm, the 7 steps to earning instructional control. When a teacher or an educator, an adult, or someone else tells you to look at something, you're pairing not just your relationship with the reinforcer, but your relationship with that person. So sometimes they will look directly at the item and never have looked at you or oriented to you, and that's okay. But usually what you'll find is as students move through the C's and move through the F, so manding, those naturally build in joint attention. So joint attention is not a prerequisite skill for doing any of these C's or any of the F's. It actually naturally teaches it as a side note. So we don't usually target joint attention alone because so many different ABLLS goals help us to develop them.
Yeah, I agree. So I wanted to point out something as well. So C29, if you've got your ABLLS, this is on page 15. C29 is follows an instruction to walk to someone and get a named item. So if I said, Jen, go to Becky and get me a pen, okay? So think about what a simple instruction that seems like that we present to kindergarten students multiple times a day. I present this to my 4-year-old. I've presented this to my 2-year-old. And I mean, right now, especially in isolation, I've kind of been like, guys, can you go get me this? Can you go get me this? So think about how many times we present that. If your student is not following that direction, what your ABLLS can help you to do is look at all of these skills that come first. So can they receptively identify the person? Can they receptively identify the object that you're asking them to get? Can they follow a simple routine instruction like sit down? If your student cannot do those 3 things, they're not going to be able to follow an instruction that says, go to a person, so you have to go, find the person, identify the object, and bring it back to them. So that's what the ABLLS will help you to do. So if you're trying to teach a goal and it's not moving along and progressing the way that you'd like it to, it's a great idea to look at your ABLLS and say, okay, so that's a receptive goal. Okay, let's go through C and see what the closest goal is to what I'm trying to teach. And if it's not mastered, then start probing some of those skills before, because if those aren't mastered, what it might be is you have to go back and teach them those first. Okay, so let's look at our green example. So if we have tell items in a class. So if you said to a student, name me some animals, and they would say, cow, dog, cat. Next is point to body parts on others. So can you touch Johnny's foot? Not that that's something you would necessarily teach, but it is a skill. Touch your own body parts. So touch your nose, and they touch their nose. Fill in items in a class. So you ride in a, and the student says car, boat, train, and then labels on body parts. So you can say, what's this? And they're like, that's my mouth. Or they don't say that's my mouth, but mouth, eyes. So which one out of these would you teach first?
So we have touch own body parts. So a lot of people are saying number 3. Some people are saying labels body parts.
So yeah, absolutely touching your own body parts. So what we want to remember is most of the time we are going to teach a receptive goal. So that's being able to identify, find an item before we're going to be able to teach, or before we're going to choose to teach labeling that item. There are some exceptions to that. Like for example, you may teach a specific label of something because you really need them to, but if you have that receptive skill, then you can use that receptive skill as a prompt. So what we can say is, find the ball, and they find the ball, and you're like, what is it? Ball, and they're like, ball. So we can use that skill as the receptive skill as a prompt as well. So we typically want to teach receptive before we go into labeling. So if you hear the words point, find, what are some other examples? Point, find, where is, those are all your receptive skills. Yeah, Jen, sorry.
Could you do a receptive to TAC transfer with me using the body parts so we can show
Yes.
them why the receptive works first for body parts as a teaching tool? So if
Yes.
I don't know how to label my own body parts yet, I don't have those expressive skills, but I already have mastered receptively, what would that look like?
So Jen, where's your eye? What is it?
Eye.
Yeah, it's your eye. Good job. You got it. So she's just heard, where's your eye? She's heard it from us and she's found it. And then we say, so what is it? And there's your label. And she says, eye. And we're like, yeah, you got it. And so that's a really great way to teach labeling of items. And you can use that with objects, body parts, anything. As you can see, after we do labeling, then and only then comes intraverbal. So we're not going to teach a student to fill in items where they have to do this without the item present and without being able to receptively identify or TAC that item. We can't then teach them to tell us what items are in a given class. So for example, if I wanted them to say, like, again, we use the ride example, what do you ride in? And they're like, car. Well, first they have to be able to label that a car is a car, and before that, they need to be able to receptively find a car in a visual field. Any questions on that? Does that make sense?
There aren't any questions from the group, but I just want to add that age 14 and 15, as it relates to a goal like body parts, is when you're trying to sort of teach the student to group things. So that would look like a nose is a type of, and they would say body part, or hey buddy, or age 15 would be sort of, would be a little bit more advanced. So can you tell me some body parts? And they would list off a bunch of body parts. So a lot of our students have goals like that when they're not yet able to receptively or expressively identify what just individual body parts are. So as you can see, H skills are very, very complex when we're missing all those prerequisites.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's go to our next one. So we're going to get into more of an academic goal. So labels letters. So when shown a B, that they can say B. Names letters in a word. So if they were given the word hat, they could say H-A-T. And then receptive letters, we say find the H, and they can find an H. So which one would we teach first?
So everyone so far is saying number 3, receptive letters.
Okay, right, receptive, so that's our C's.
Yeah.
Sorry, were you gonna say something else?
No, I was just gonna say receptive letters pointing to a letter on request. It would still be in an array of like 3 letters. So it's not just holding up an A and they touch the A. It's actually still in an array of letters, but it's just not the letters in a word.
Right, and you're going to hear, can you find? So can you find means within another visual thing. So yes, receptive letters, labels letters, and then name letters in words. So before a student can say H, A, T, first they need to be able to receptively find that H. So we do see students who are working on maybe labeling letters, but then when we probe, can they find that letter? They're having difficulty there. And again, as Jen and I showed you the example with your eye, we can use that receptive skill to teach labeling those letters as well. I think this one's a little bit more clear because I do see teachers using a lot, like this is an academic goal and you guys are masters at teaching academic goals. Okay, so I think this is our last example. So if we have match object to picture, so if they're given a duck, they can match it to a picture of a duck. And match word to word, so they're given the word duck and the word duck is written and they match those. Match picture to object, so now the opposite, you're given a picture of a duck and the duck is sitting, can you match that? And again, this is all going to be in an array of typically 3. Match picture to picture, so you have 2 identical pictures. You're given a picture of a duck, there's a picture of a duck within your array, can you match that to that? And then match object to object, so you have a rubber ducky and you're going to match it to a rubber duck. So which one would we be teaching first? And if you're looking this up in your ABLLS, these are your B skills.
So there's a good mix between people who think matching picture to picture would come first and matching object to object would come first. So could you tell us, when you go to the next slide, why it's easier to do one versus the other?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, object to object is first. So typically we teach that actual object. Again, students have manipulated that object. It's concrete, it's right in front of you. A picture of things, I'm sure you've all looked at a picture and been like, is that really that? A picture is not as concrete as actually having that object in front of you, and it doesn't always very well represent what that object looks like. We've all seen pictures of a dresser and we're like, okay. I know the card box that, I'm sure you've had this, Jen, the card box that you had, I'm sure, at CHIO, and we had our receptive picture box. Sometimes I go through and I'm like, what is this? Like, no one knows that that's a French fry. It's like one French fry, right? So pictures are not always good representative of what the object actually looks like. So we teach object first because it's actually a concrete object in front of you. And then we're going to move to object to picture, and then picture to picture, and then picture to object, and then word to word. So this is giving them those skills to match before we're actually going to get them to match word to word. So if you're trying...
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, if you're trying to teach your student to match, say, their name to their name, or the letters in their name to match, if that's not going well for you, you might want to go back and probe their early B skills, so B3, B4, B5, B6. If they don't have those skills, that might be the prerequisites that are impeding you from teaching something like matching the letters or matching their names to their names.
So there is a comment from Becky that this is very developmentally sequenced, right? And so that's a really good point, because oftentimes we see 2 things in classrooms that we right away want to probe earlier ABLLS skills. Number 1 is when you see kids doing file folder type activities, and it's a lot of matching words to words. Or it's
pictures to pictures.
Yeah, or it's a lot of matching letters of their name to the bigger name, which again is a later cue skill. So, and a lot of times when we go, and that's just all fully physically prompted or heavily prompted with gestures for pretty much the whole school year. And so what's going wrong there is that the student is lacking a lot of prerequisite skills. So that's one thing where I usually cue myself, okay, I need to baseline some early B skills, because this kiddo is, they're expecting a much further skill, and it's too prompted, right? So these things should be going, you should be able to teach them to independence pretty quickly if your student has the prerequisites, because you're just building on the previous block slowly. And the second thing that we often see is common in classrooms is when a student isn't following receptive instructions, people whip out visuals right away. So it's like, go to the door. Oh, Billy isn't going to the door, so I want to show him a picture. But if your student doesn't have the skill to match the picture and understand that the picture of the door is the same, figuratively speaking, like it represents the actual door, that's a really complex skill. And so if you want your student, when you say, pick up your pencil, an easier way to teach them what a pencil is versus showing them a picture of the pencil and saying, like, pick up the pencil, your student doesn't necessarily understand that that picture represents this object, even if it's the exact same picture, okay? Because that's, again, a skill that oftentimes needs to be explicitly taught. So first we would say pencil and pencil, put the pencil in an array of 3 items and say match, and see if your student understands that these things go together. Then you would work toward a progression of object to picture, picture to picture, then picture to object. And once your student has B6, teaching using visuals as a prompt is likely to be much more successful. Absolutely. But keep in mind, there's a lot of B's that come first. So those are some common things that are sparking for me on this slide, Mare, that we see all the time in classrooms, and our students just simply don't have the prerequisite skills.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah. Also, to build on what we were talking about is using a prompt. So if you are trying to teach a label, we can use receptive as a prompt. So find I, what is it, I? But if you're trying to teach receptive skills, then we can use a match for that. So if I said to Jen, match, and I handed her a picture of the duck, for example. So I have a picture of a duck and she has a picture of a duck, and I said match, and she says, and she puts the duck with the duck. Sorry, this is a harder one to do together. And then I said, where's the duck? Then she can point to the duck. And then eventually we can say, where's the duck? She points to the duck, and I say, what is it? She says duck. This is a harder one because I can't actually hand you something to match. But so we can use the skills below to help teach those further level skills. So that's another great reason that you want to make sure they have them, is because they can help you to teach further along.
I do have another question, Mare, coming in that I haven't answered, which is someone's asking, they would need to know what match means. So when you're teaching an early B skill, like, how do you know if your student understands the language of match? So when you're teaching that, can you explain how are you also teaching the language?
So we're going to do that the same way as Jen was talking about teaching a receptive skill is going to line. So we're going to have their reinforcer available. We're going to say, Jen, match. I'm going to gently guide her hand to take the picture or the object to match it. And I'm going to say, match, you match. Here you go. And I'm going to give her her reinforcer immediately so that she understands, oh, when I hear that word match, my hand is prompted to match it. And look at me, I'm matching. So eventually, once they have receptively learned the skill match, then we just need to teach them to actually match as well. But we're going to physically prompt that and reinforce it immediately. And then we're going to fade those prompts because we want to make sure that she's not relying on, when that happens, I can hold my hand here until someone prompts. So no, that's a great question though. How do we teach that? So most of the times what we're going to tell you is how to teach a skill is we are going to tell you to prompt it, fade your prompts, and make sure that you reinforce immediately.
Perfect.
Okay. We do have one more. I thought we were on our last one. All right, so here's a math academic goals. So count objects with a prompt. So count objects to 10 when the sequence is started for you. So the student goes, we say to the student 1, 2, and then they go 3, 4, 5, and they count their objects to 10. Rote counting to 10, so 1, 2, 3. Count objects from a larger group. So if you're given 5 blocks, you're given 7 blocks and you say, give me 5, and they can count out 5 and give them to you. Add numbers to quantity. So if you're asked to make 4 spoons and you have 2, that they can add 2 more to make the number 4. Add numbers to numbers. So that's just 2 plus 2. Count given objects. So that's 1-to-1 correspondence. So 1, 2, 3, and they're counting the objects with the object in front of them. And then rote counting with prompts. So count to 10 when the sequence is started for them. Sorry,
okay,
the first one. Yeah. So which one will we teach first?
So most people are writing number 7, rote counting with prompts. There are some people saying number 6, so count given objects.
Okay.
And I think that's all that's come through so far.
Okay, so this would be R in your ABLLS, I believe. So R1, yes, is counting, rote counting with prompts. So we're teaching them to count and we're prompting them to do so. So this is actually one of the domains that does have a lot of prompting involved. And then the next one is without the prompt, and then prompting, and then without the prompt. So yes, rote counting comes first, count objects with prompts comes next, then counting your given objects without any type of prompts, and then are we counting objects from groups, and then are we adding. So what we want to make sure that if we're asking our student to count objects from a group, so we're like, here you go, let's count 1, 2, 3. Can they rote count first? Can they count, even rote counting with a prompt? If they can't, then that's probably where they're getting stuck on those skills. But again, this is one that you guys are, you know, masters at breaking down our academic skills, and we do see you break these down fairly commonly. I think the ones that are more difficult are knowing how to go from matching to receptive to tacting for each individual skill, because it's not like C1 or B1, C1, and G1 all line up. So you have to go through the ABLLS and find which one is the receptive version, which one is the matching version, and which one is the tacting version.
So Marilyn, we have 2 questions coming through the chat box. One is, can you explain the difference between rote counting and counting objects?
So rote counting is just simply counting. I have nothing in front of me, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Counting objects is you're given, say, your 5 fingers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Does that answer the question? Yeah.
Yep. And another question is, what about nonverbal students? So obviously with a non-vocal student, rote counting, because it's a verbal skill, is not going to be your first priority. And so depending on what kind of other skills they have, you might pick a different R skill first. So you might have them count objects from a group. So you might start at R5, where you give the student a bowl of beads and you say, give me 1 bead, and you prompt them to give you 1 bead. You say 1, 1, then you go and you use blocks. Give me 1 block, and they give you 1. So that is a skill that doesn't require a vocal response. It's a skill that only can be taught very effectively receptively, and you would build that student up to different numbers. You might start between 1 and 5, give me 5 beads, and prompt them to count out 1, 2, and you can be the one counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I just want to point out that through all of these progression activities, we're giving you a lot of tips and tricks on how to teach these skills, but this is not how you complete an ABLLS assessment. Yeah. This is just how you look at a progression of skills, and we're giving you tips and tricks on when you're ready to teach the skill, how you would teach it. So Marilyn is going to get into detail about how to baseline a skill to see if the student has it without any prompts versus how we're teaching it effectively with prompts. So that will come. That was a question in the chat box as well. Yeah. So I have another question coming in, Marilyn. Someone is saying her student counts using her iPad. She touches the object and then she touches the number on the iPad. So it looks like she counts it and then uses her ProLoco to go or whatever her device is to give the sort of the replacement vocal response or the verbal response.
Yeah, and that's fantastic as long as the student is independent at doing so. So what you don't want to have to do is tell them to count it and then prompt them through where to go to find the 5, and then, you know, prompt them to find the 5. If they can independently count them, look at their iPad and choose that 5, then yes, you're actually demonstrating the skill of using a verbal as your iPad. However, if you're having to prompt that heavily, you're going to want to A, look at do they have the prerequisite skills to be doing that, and B, and not to mention there's a lot of other prerequisite skills involved there, right? There's categories. Can they categorize it? This is the place on my iPad that I have to push for numbers. And then can they get in and receptively find the number 5? And then can they also associate that that is the 5 that they counted? So there's a lot of skills going on there, not just being able to select it. So yeah. But yes, absolutely, that would be demonstrating the skill. And I mean, sometimes you need to get a little creative if your learner isn't vocal, but also you can talk to one of us if you need some tips on that as well. Okay, so before we move on any further, is there any questions in general about progression? So remember, these are examples, so they're not the only way to teach skills, and it doesn't mean that another splinter skill might not be there. So a student might be able to label something because they've memorized how to label one thing repeatedly. It doesn't mean that they receptively can identify that item necessarily. It doesn't mean that they even have the matching skills for that item. So there are some, random splinter skills, but in general, this is a progression. The assessment tool maps out it for you. So you can use your ABLLS and you can go through and find what those prerequisite skills, it does it for you in order. So it kind of takes a little bit of the work away. Remember, some of the splinter skills that a student might have might be based on these really specific interests that they have. So if a student is really proficient in, say, computers or trains, they might have a whole bunch of labels that have to do with trains and parts of trains and receptive identifying parts of trains, but it doesn't mean that they have that skill generalized to every other part. So can they label other items other than that? Can they receptively identify other items? They may have a random splinter skill, like a really high C skill, but we still have to go back and look at teaching some of those others. And so if you are doing a comprehensive, go ahead and probe those splinter skills that you believe they might have, absolutely. But today we're just going to talk to you a little bit about how to probe certain skills and how to use the ABLLS to teach you the progression of those skills and how to baseline certain skills and use it more of an assessment for those specific skills, rather than doing a full comprehensive ABLLS, which, as Jen said yesterday, that could take months. We also had a question yesterday about how often would you do an ABLLS. So in a clinical environment, depending on the learner and the speed of the learning process, so maybe 4 to 6 months. But in a school system, maybe yearly if we could get that done. I know I've done maybe 2 or 3 like full ABLLS, otherwise we've just been probing a lot of skills. So don't feel the need to do a full ABLLS on your student multiple times a year. We understand that it's a different setting, absolutely. Any questions popping up there, Jen? Are we good to move on?
No questions. However, I did want to point out when you were mentioning about perseverative interests and how sometimes our students have splinter skills because they have such a strong interest in something as a reinforcer. That is why the ABLLS guide you to how many targets are required to get mastery in a certain area. So for example, C16 and C17, receptive objects and receptive pictures, are requiring you to get level 4 at least 100. So it doesn't matter that you can pick one train from another train. It matters that can be 1 or 2 of you, depending on how many you have, but as a whole, it needs to be 100 different common objects or 100 different common pictures before you can be considered mastered at level 4. So it does force you as the assessor to look far beyond what your student is just interested in receptively. It has to be more common objects in the environment to master at that level.
And that being said, in the end of your ABLLS, you have an appendices that gives you examples of different skills or different labels, different adjectives, different receptive skills to teach or to probe first, kind of as the most common ones. Of course, you can probe other skills. Maybe your student knows some receptive pictures or labeling some items that aren't on this list. But it kind of gives you an idea of, some food, some furniture. You want to make sure you get a little bit across all of the different categories, not just one specific category, so that they have a good array to start on. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about puzzles. So we're talking still about progression of skills. So let's call the horse puzzle A, the dinosaur B, is that a fire policeman C, sorry, and the train D. Which one would you teach first?
So mostly people are saying A. Now, can you write in the chat box why you think
that was, yeah,
first? Yeah.
That was going to be my next question, yeah.
So people are saying because it involves picture-to-picture matching.
Good.
So it looks like an embedded prompt. There's individual pieces, so it's a single inset.
Yeah.
The handles, people are noticing that the handles might be easier in terms of a fine motor skill.
Absolutely.
To easily hold it. There's so many coming in quickly, so I'm trying to read quickly. That there's only 3 pieces as opposed to more pieces, so it might be easier. It looks very straightforward. And there's less choices. So there's less pieces, but also less choices for where they would go.
Absolutely. So you hit all the things that we want to talk about. So picture-to-picture matching. There's a big handle, so that's a Z skill for your fine motors. There's only 3, it's a single inset. So that being said, what would you teach next? Or probe next?
So there's a couple people saying C, the police officer, and then there's a lot of people saying D, the train.
Okay. So yeah, I would teach D next as well. You still have the picture-to-picture. You still have less pieces than B and C. You still have a knob. Now, yes, it's reduced in size, but it's still smaller. And then we're starting to move on to the next types of puzzles, which are actual jigsaw puzzles. So this slide explains it all for you. So yes, everyone said big knobs, sphere pieces, picture-to-picture matching, single inset for A. For B, so the knobs are still there, but they're getting a little bit smaller. They're fading out. There's a few more pictures, but they're still picture-to-picture matching. And it's one whole picture. Whoop. Sorry, my...
That's okay. I'm just going to look up, Mira, while you're doing that, these actual B skills in the ABLLS, because you want to make sure that your student is able to do this with multiple different puzzles, right? So for B1, the puzzle with the single inset, you're not just going to do the farm puzzle. You're going to do a variety of different puzzles that are very similar. They're all single inset. They all have bigger knobs. They all have matching pictures underneath. All of those are embedded prompts or things that make it easier to complete the puzzle. And if you look at B10, let's see what B10 says. How many puzzles? So 4 different puzzles with at least 8 pieces each. So that we know your student isn't just memorizing where to put everything, that they're actually learning the problem solving skills, that the visual performance skills that B domain is meant to teach. So there's a lot of students out there that can memorize puzzles, and then we make the mistake of saying, oh, he can do puzzles, but he can't. He's just memorized the couple of puzzles that he either prefers to do, or the couple of ones that happen to be out at the activity center the most. So probing this as an assessment, you would take a novel puzzle that the student's never seen before, and you would say, do the puzzle and see what they can do. And I also want to point out the difference between Z3 and Z4. So these are visual performance skills, but it's also to do with fine motor skills. So Z3 with a big knob is an easier fine motor skill than Z4. So you can assess if your student can do one of these B1 puzzles, and you would fill it in both in the B section and the Z section. So there aren't a lot of skills that do that are in multiple places, but this is one. So we wanted to make sure we give you both of those.
And on a side note, if your student is specifically having issues with the tiny knob because of fine motor skills, you could still teach other types of puzzles. You could maybe go on to a B10 type of puzzle because the fine motor would be less hard than the little tiny knobs on the B1 puzzle. However, you still want to make sure that you go and teach different ways to increase that fine motor of the Z4. Okay, so only once we could teach all of these puzzles would we move on to more of a jigsaw type puzzle where they're given all the pieces kind of in a box and they have to design it themselves without the square inset, without any matching, and they have to look at the picture and figure out where all those pictures or all the pieces go on their own. Another thing being said that Jen mentioned there, and I just wanted to highlight it because you just kind of said it briefly, but it's really important. The materials that we are going to use in our ABLLS assessment are not the same materials that we are going to teach with, because we want to make sure that those materials are kind of that novel thing. Or if you did assess it and then teach with it, you want to make sure that you get a novel exemplar for probing again to make sure that it's mastered so that they're not just learning on that one puzzle. And we will talk about that a little bit more when we go into the actual assessment.
So Marilyn, there was a question from Judy. Can we also be teaching the students what the pictures are of, cow, horse, sheep? So Becky said for sure, because of course, especially educators, they take advantage of every teachable moment, right? So we're not just doing a puzzle, but we're also talking about that it's a dinosaur, and we're also talking about that the piece is a red piece. So I would say that's very student specific. Some students can handle that much feedback coming at them. But for some of our students, certainly the earlier learner students, we want to make sure we're teaching one lesson at a time. So if you've attended PECS training, that's one thing that they really, really focus on when they're talking about the progression of communication skills, is our students might learn better with less distraction or stimuli coming at them. So do the puzzle is the goal. And so for those very early learners, we would not also be talking about this is a dinosaur and this piece is red and this is first, next, last, or any of those other skills that might be very natural to throw in to our other kiddos. So you just really, this is when you guys know your students, right? And you know what is the simplest way to teach and what kind of levels of skills that they need. And I will point out, Marilyn, that it is 10 o'clock. So I don't know when you wanted to take a break, but I just wanted to flag you for the time.
Perfect. Let's do our review and then we'll take a little break. On what you just said too, Jen, what we want to remember, and I love that you pointed it out, is that if the student's goal was do puzzle and they put the 3 pieces in and they're expecting a reinforcer, and then you say, oh, this is a cow, this is a horse, this is a sheep, they're like, where's my reinforcer? I'm doing more work, right? So it depends on what level, if they're on multiple steps before they access a reinforcer, or if they're actually on what we call like a continuous reinforcement schedule where they're getting reinforcement each time. And we want to make sure that we're not almost punishing the skill of do puzzle and then more work is going to come right after. Okay, so let's do a few of our little reviews here. So in the chat box, you can tell us the ABLLS assessment can help you to 1, evaluate the student's current mastered skills across many domains. 2, break down big learning goals into smaller goals. 3, help you identify progression of skills to teach. Or 4, all of the above.
So everyone's coming in fast and furious with number 4.
Good for you guys. Awesome. So yeah, we can absolutely evaluate their needs. So where are their current skills? What do we need to teach? We can break down those bigger goals. So remember, something as big as tell me all the animals, we can break that down into so many little goals to teach them first. And it can help us identify which of those goals we need to teach first. Okay, so now seems like kind of a good time to take that little break. So what we talked about this morning was the progression of skills. Next, we're going to go into actually conducting that assessment, and then we will talk about those 10 START skills that we have chosen for you, and then just a little brief wrap up on the IEP.
And we want to be finished, not too much longer after 11:30 so that we can have a discussion. And I just want to remind everyone, if you can mute your microphone and feel free to turn off your video, because we are going to record again this part for future use. So if your video comes on, then you'll be on the video.
In our video. Yeah. All right, so we are going to dive back in. So we did talk this morning a little bit more about the progression. Now we're going to go into how to use it as an actual assessment tool. So the first thing I want to remind you is this is a formal assessment. So this is not an observational assessment. So we would not say, oh, I've seen him do that before and fill it in on the grid. We would formally assess these skills, and we do so using specific ways to do that. So we're going to talk about that right now. So again, this is a formal assessment. We would make sure that we are prepared, and we're going to give you a checklist in the next slide on how to do so. But first, let's talk about the differences between, so when you hear us say baseline, that's our word for assessment of the skill before we've taught it. So where are we at right now, the baseline? And then the difference between when we're actually teaching the skill. So I know that there's a little bit of a blurred line this morning because we were talking a lot about the different ways to teach skills and how we would prompt them. None of those things apply when we're actually baselining a skill. Those are for teaching the skill. So here are the differences. When we're doing a baseline, there is absolutely no prompting. So for example, if we use the example Jen used about going to line up, if we said, okay, Billy, it's time to line up, we would simply pause, wait the 3 to 5 seconds, and then mark it as a yes or no. So we are not going to prompt Billy, we're not going to physically prompt him, we're not going to repeat the demand again, so go line up. There's no prompting involved. However, when we're teaching, that's where we would put all those juicy antecedent prompts in. Okay, Billy, here's your reinforcer, it's time to line up. We're going to bring him over to the line, maybe using a gentle physical guidance, and we're going to get him to the line. However, remember, in a baseline, none of that is happening. Someone asked yesterday, and I'm not sure whether I addressed it out loud or whether I just addressed it in the chat box, but someone said, if there is a processing delay for the student, would the 3 to 5 seconds be different? And so my advice was to look at the psych report that's in his OSR, or have the teacher look at it, have the parent share it, and they would outline exactly how long they would need for that processing speed. So if they say, you know, instead of 3 to 5 seconds, it might need 10 seconds, okay, but we want that to be outlined in a psych report if we know that they have a formal processing delay. Would you agree, Jen?
Yes, and someone did just ask that in the chat box, if it's always 3 to 5 seconds. So the answer is yes, because you want the student, we want to be assessing, can the student do the skill under our instructional control, not 5 minutes later or 1 minute later when they kind of feel up to it. Is the skill there? Is it a can't do or won't do? So part of our role as behavior analysts is to assess the difference. But when it comes to assessing, it doesn't actually matter that much, because we want to see, are they responding immediately under the instructional control of the person asking them.
And in your task objective, in your ABLLS, it is going to tell you directly what the SD is, so what we would say to the student in order for them to do it, and what's expected of them. So that's outlined in your task objective. They give you example questions on exactly how to ask the question, and then they give you the criteria for it being a yes or a no. So the ABLLS, again, it does it for you. So again, reminder, there's no prompting in a baseline assessment. This is a formal assessment. The next thing is we're not reinforcing the skills. So when the student goes to line, so if we say line up and they do in fact go to line, we're not then saying, great job, I love how you went to line, good job, high five. Because we're not just assessing one time. Most of these say that they have to be able to do it multiple times. So I'm not going to give you an exact example of how many times they have to do it, but 4 more times across 3 different areas, 3 or more pictures, 50 or more pictures. So what the risk is if we reinforce that specific skill, then when we probe it later on in the day or later on in the session, that might have actually influenced their response. So what we can reinforce is we can reinforce their behavior. So if you were sitting at a table and you were probing some pictures, for example, so can they receptively identify dog, cat, and mouse? You might say to the student, I love that you're sitting with me, you're doing such a great job waiting, or like, I love that you're sitting with your hands so nice, or something like that. So you're reinforcing the behavior that comes around them responding, but not the specific response. We would say, that's right, that is a cat. We would say, you're doing such a good job answering me. Even if they were incorrect, we can still reinforce their behavior, not the actual skill. However, in contrast, when we're teaching, yes, the main goal is to reinforce those skills each and every time at a high rate of reinforcement, so those skills are more likely to occur in the future. So, review, no prompting the skill. So we give the instruction, we wait the 3 to 5 seconds, the behavior happens or does not happen, and then we do not prompt it after, and we do not reinforce it. So it simply happens or happens, and we move on to the next. And last but not least, this can be more structured, and we almost want it to be a little bit more structured because you're going to have certain materials with you, which we'll go over in the checklist on the next page, but we want to make sure that we're not just, you know what, I'm going to probe that right now. No, this is a formal assessment, so we have to say, okay, I'm actually going to take the time right now and I'm going to probe C1 response to name. what are the materials I need, what are the data sheets I need, what is the SD, so what is the instruction, and be ready to do that assessment right now, not just kind of on the fly. When we're in a natural on the fly, that's our teaching time. So throughout the day, as many opportunities as we need throughout the day, we can embed it into different teaching opportunities, but this is a formal assessment. We want to make sure that nothing else is influencing the chance that they will or will not respond. So I'm going to review that again because this is very important because it can really skew our data. So there's no prompting. We give the instruction. We wait our 3 to 5 seconds, depending on the processing speed of the student, of course. We wait for a response. If the response occurs or does not occur, we then move on to our next trial. We can reinforce, I like that you're with me, I like that you're sitting, I like that you're listening, but we're not reinforcing the specific skill. In the teaching part, that's our level 3. Antecedent prompts galore, reinforcing all the skills and every single response that's correct. Also reinforcing lots of the behavior that comes around it, and it's natural. We don't want it to look structured and robotic when we're teaching. We want that to look natural and embedded as much as possible into our day. But for our actual assessment, we want this to look structured and to actually look like an assessment. So we are going to go through the checklist, but first I want to make sure that there's no questions here because this part is very important for the assessment to make sure that our data is not skewed in any way, shape, or form.
So there are a couple of questions, Marilyn, that have come in both privately and to the group. One thing that I want to clarify, someone said, so if we want to teach a skill, for example, C9 follows routine instructions, are you saying that we always need to assess first? So yes, so the ABLLS is an applied behavior analysis based tool, which means always an ABA. We would never start teaching a goal without first understanding where our student is at in a baseline or an assessment. So we would baseline with C9 a list of maybe 10 or even 20 common routine instructions that we give in the classroom. Then we would systematically over several days, over several different people. So it has to be the English teacher, the French teacher, you can get the resource teacher to come in and say, line up at the door, get out your math book, put your shoes on for recess, whatever all the common instructions are that you've agreed upon ahead of time. And you're scoring if the student goes and does that, or at least initiates the response. So they don't have to have their whole shoe on within 3 to 5 seconds, but they at least have to be headed to the cubby to get their shoe on within 3 to 5 seconds. And then you're scoring a yes if they did that and a no if they didn't. So it's important for your baseline to happen across multiple people, multiple environments, and if you can, vary your instruction. So it's not always robotic. Go line up at the door, Billy. Go line up at the door, Billy. It should be whatever the natural language is that is commonly used in your environment. So it's time to line up. Or, hey, Billy, go get in line. You want to make sure you're varying those because you want to capture the reality of what's happening in your classroom. Sometimes we can get very robotic and we don't realize that we are conditioning students to only listen to certain instructions in a certain way or in a certain tone of voice or something. So make sure that that's happening in your baseline. But in ABA, yes, we always would do a baseline, see where our student is at, and then go ahead and do teaching. Another question came up is who? Sorry,
I just wanted to add to that for a second before we go to the next question. And what Jen said is true, and for multiple reasons, everything that you said, but the other thing is if we look at C9 criteria, filling in one box of the grid is at least 2 instructions without prompts. The second box is 4 instructions without prompts, all the way up to 6 instructions without prompts, and can follow at least 4 different actions within 10 seconds. So if we don't baseline and we just start teaching, we don't know where they were to start because there's multiple steps in that criteria. It's not just they can follow an instruction. There's all those multiple little goals within the goal. So we have to make sure that we know exactly where they were to say that we can show progress. Because if we might spend a lot of time teaching a goal that they actually have mastered and it's more of an instructional control thing. So if they already have this goal mastered, we might be teaching it for a different reason. And it's not a can't do, it's a won't do.
That's right. And another point to make there is it's when you're starting to do an ABLLS assessment, or I would say any type of assessment of student performance, it's very important to be aware of your own inadvertent prompting. Because oftentimes when I say it's time to line up, I look at the door. And if your student has joint attention and they're looking at you and looking at the door and they're like, oh, that's where I'm supposed to go. It's not necessarily that they're following the instruction, it's that they're following your prompt. Oftentimes I'm coaching teams because they don't realize how much they're gesturally prompting to things. They're always just gesturally prompting, right? And again, that's because it's such an inherent part of the way that you educate, which is a good thing, that you're always trying to make students successful. So it becomes part of your own behavioral repertoire to give a prompt or giving an instruction. Whereas with an assessment, we have to be very conscious of that. And early on in my career, when I was an instructor therapist, we would watch each other because we would cue each other. Jen, you looked at the card that you wanted him to touch. You didn't even realize that you looked at the card, but he saw you looking at the card, or we don't know if he saw you or not. So it is a skill to develop, to assess without any prompting.
And I posted on the, I posted on the Google Plus community just because it's a fun tip, but you should all go watch it if you haven't seen it already. I think it's like a 1999 episode of The Simpsons where everyone believes that Maggie is this genius baby because she can receptively identify all these crazy pictures of things that, like, I don't even know what they are, okay? And then in the end, Lisa, being the genius that she is, actually realizes by recording herself that she's giving a prompt every time. So she'll be like, where's the armadillo? And she was looking just subtly every time, and Maggie had picked that up, and that was actually why she was picking all the right answers every time. So it can be so subtle that sometimes it is good to have someone come in and just say, like, how am I doing on this? And, you know, Jen and I still do that with each other. I'm like, you prompted them. And she's like, oh, you know, and it's very natural because we are teachers. I mean, teaching things so often that it's natural to kind of prompt. So it is a skill to develop to be able to do an actual assessment without prompting. And honestly, so many times I've been like, not a trial, I just prompted, sorry, my bad. You know, it's hard, so.
And you'll see that in some of our videos. So coming up, we do have a series of videos, and it's us with our own kids a couple of years ago doing assessments. And you'll see it's so natural when they do the right thing to go, yeah, but then you're like, I just reinforced, which could impact their future responding. We want to see where they're at without any reinforcement. I do have another question, Mare, that I want to address. People are asking in the chat box, who can do an ABLLS assessment? So while it is a behavior analytic tool, that comes from ABA and created by BCBAs, you don't have to be a BCBA to conduct an ABLLS assessment. That's why we're doing this training. We would like you to have this resource at your fingertips and to feel more comfortable with dipping your toe in, so looking at the grid and understanding what it means when it comes to you from somewhere else, but also using it as an aid for progression of skills to see, okay, where should I be going, and where did I miss, or where's the student's deficits in this area, but also to be able to use it to help you in addition to your regular assessment tools. So as we said yesterday, this is not designed to replace the educational assessments that you do in the classroom to assess IEP goals, to assess where your student is at for their report card, to assess all of the reading levels, for example. We want you to continue to use those, so we can't stress that enough. This is not a replacement tool. What this is hopefully a tool that can help you, especially with all of those basic learning assessment skills that are from A to N, which are usually, I'm not aware of anyway, most of them are not covered in other types of assessment tools, or most other assessment tools, because they're so specific and they're so broken down. And they're really, really good skills to be teaching and to be assessing for a lot of our students with developmental delays and or autism. So we don't want to be replacing it. You don't have to be a BCBA. Really anyone, as long as you understand how to conduct assessments and how to use the tool, can be doing this. So a big question coming up in the chat box is, can EAs or support staffs conduct the assessment? So as far as I am aware, it is part of the teacher's role in the classroom to be conducting formal assessments. So that doesn't mean the teaching isn't happening by multiple people, but any kind of a formal assessment, like a reading assessment or anything like that, would be conducted by the teacher. So I do understand that we have a lot of EAs attending today, which is fantastic. And a lot of them are saying that they do regularly assess students' IEP goals, and they do regularly take sort of baseline data of where a student is at. So if that's part of your common practice, then that's fine.
I would do it with the direction of your teacher. So if your teacher has directed you to go ahead, then yes, yeah.
That's right. So just like you would just not pick up the ABLLS and start assessing a student in the C domain, because the teacher is the one who is supposed to be leading and instructing what they want you to do. So another thing came up, and so if the teacher says to you, I would love for you to probe, here's a data sheet, could you please probe this today or baseline this today, then of course. But I wouldn't just encourage an educational assistant to be making those decisions on your own, because that's the role of the teacher. Another thing that came up in the chat box, Marilyn, people are saying, but my teacher doesn't know anything about the ABLLS, or my resource teacher isn't sure about the ABLLS. And that's okay, we know that. So we've only done 2 ABLLS trainings so far, 3 ABLLS trainings so far in the last couple of years. Some people were familiar with the ABLLS from different connections programs or different avenues from being in connection with some ABA providers. But we designed this training primarily originally for assessment class teachers, because we really wanted to more heavily use this tool, because so many of the students there are working on some of these prerequisite skills to the kindergarten program.
Yeah.
And we had itinerant resource teachers in our department were invited to attend that training. So they have attended the training and should understand some of the ABLLS. I believe, who else attended that training, Marilyn? I believe some of the other people in our department, special education student services, were invited to that training. Some of the ed consultants, for example.
Yes, I can't remember who specifically was there, so I don't want to call anyone out, but there was definitely other people from the department, 100%.
So this is our first time really offering this training. This is the first time ever offering this training to teachers, resource teachers, administration, educators, whether it's an educational assistant or an ECE. So it's okay that this might be very new to you and very new to your school team. You might go back in September and say ABLLS, and you know, people are like, what's that? And that's part of the reason why we wanted to offer this now, is because it's easier to be able to offer it to more people, but also because we're recording it so that in the future you can access these recordings to learn more. So I'm going to read through the chat. Someone's asking, how does this compare to the Carolina curriculum that was introduced to us years ago? Wanda, I'm not sure, because the Carolina curriculum doesn't have anything to do with applied behavior analysis, and that's, as behavior analysts, the ABLLS is a tool that we use for that. So I'm not sure how it compares.
Another thing too, while Jen's looking through the comments, is we designed this training together, sitting down and saying, okay, if you were going to truly dip your toes in, what is the first thing that would be? And the first thing the very first thing is know what an ABLLS is and understand that it's an assessment tool. The second thing is to be familiar with the grid and what it looks like and what it represents, so the skills within it. So if at the very least you all walk back to your school and say, okay, which of our students are in, you know, a private ABA organization, and you access those grids and you start looking at them, that's a really great start. Honestly, that is how we started in a clinical environment. The first thing we had to learn is, okay, let's look at this grid and learn how to start to read it. The next thing we start to do is then we start to look at the progression of skills, start to understand the skills. When I was in a clinical environment, I could name off, honest to God, almost 80% of these. Now I've forgotten what some of the skills are like actually labeled. But that's the next part, to start to understand the progression, understand what the, you know, smaller steps within them are. And then the next step is actually starting to complete some of those assessments yourself. So no way are we saying that you should go home and start doing a full ABLLS assessment on all of your kids. It's to become familiar, to start to understand that it's a good assessment tool for some of your students you're working for, and maybe to, you know, get your school more interested in watching the training as well, because the more people who are trained, the more of you who speak and collaboratively work together on these assessments, the easier it will become and the more natural it will become to do so. So yeah, no way are we saying, watch this, go home and start doing it. But it is a really great way to start becoming more familiar with it.
So more comments and questions, Marilyn, in the chat box.
Yeah.
Someone was just clarifying again that you don't have to be a BCBA to do this assessment. No, you don't. Anybody can conduct an ABLLS assessment. Of course, becoming a BCBA, part of our practice is understanding how to complete a variety of different assessments, some of which can be completed by anyone, some of which, without the expertise of this credential, you wouldn't want to take on. So it is not.
And I would recommend reaching out to your behavior analyst or consultant to kind of help you guide you through the first couple times to make sure that everything's going well. But it does not, you don't need to be a BCBA to complete one, but absolutely having our guidance to kind of help you through that first starting part is going to make you stronger in the long run of doing the assessment.
That's right. There's another question, are they able to share the grids with us? So a teacher or a resource teacher can reach out to an ABA provider, reach out to a parent and request the ABLLS assessment. We, as behavior analysts, often in collaboration with the teacher, reach out directly to the ABA provider to discuss where students are at and goals that there are. But it is the parent who has to provide the ABLLS assessment to the school. So that is something that has to go through the parent. Someone is asking once again, can EAs baseline skills? So under the direction of your teacher, yes, you as an EA can, baseline a certain skill in certain areas or help conduct the assessment. But like I said, I would not, as an EA, just go ahead and do it. I would definitely let the teacher lead in that area, because these are skills that may end up bridging into some of the skills on the IEP. These are skills that if they're going to be taught and targeted, and there's going to be a lesson plan created around how to do that, then you definitely would want the teacher to be involved.
But being aware of how to collect the baseline data also helps you to take your day-to-day data. Because when you're taking your daily data on whether or not they could go to line, we're formally doing not baseline, but we're using these same strategies. We are not prompting the student before we take the data on yes or no, could they do it, because that's going to skew our data on whether or not they're actually learning the skill independently. So knowing these skills, whether or not you were the one doing the formal assessment, this will help you to take your daily data, because when you are marking your data daily on yes or no, did they get it, you're using these same strategies. So you're not prompting, you're not reinforcing. Then you're going to go into 100 teaching trials or whatever you need of the day, and then you're going to use your teaching skills. But when you take your first data of the day on that skill, you're going to be using the same points under the baseline. So this will still help you along with that.
So more questions. Do we need parent permission to conduct an assessment? So as a behavior analyst, if which is very rare in the school system, I would conduct a full comprehensive ABLLS assessment, then yes, I would get parent permission, because I would be doing an ABLLS assessment report at the end to sit down with the parent, discuss the results, go through all the information with them, what the findings were of this assessment, etc. You as a school team, if you're deciding, okay, we're going to baseline C9 and we're going to look it up and we're going to read the instructions of how to do it, and we're going to, maybe help from this book pull some of the lesson plan out of how to teach it properly using ABA, then no, you don't need a parent's permission for that. Just like when you baseline any skill a student has to see where they're at, it's inherently part of what you do in a classroom. So that's okay. Realistically, I don't think many of you or most of you are going to go and do a complete comprehensive ABLLS assessment in a classroom. So we do have EAs and ECEs both through the public messages as well as the private, just really appreciating this opportunity. So I know Becky Carter is the lead of the ABA and ASD team, and I know she's on and she's appreciating that feedback, that you guys really appreciate being a part of this kind of training. How do you know if a student has an ABLLS assessment? That would be if they're in a private ABA clinical setting, which parents often will disclose to the resource teacher, the classroom teacher, or the administration team, then they likely will have an ABLLS. There are a couple that do different type of ABA learning assessment called the VB maps, which is very similar in terms of what types of skills that are assessed. And the VB maps, because we're not doing a training on it, you might want to have, you might want to consult with one of us to help you interpret. Okay. No, so no data that you track. So someone's asking if we are tracking some data on the ABLLS assessment goals, would a clinical setting use that later on? No, because clinical settings are using their own assessment tools and using their own data. Yeah, so it would be the teacher and the resource teacher that requests any kind of assessment data from parents. It would never be the EA or the ECE that requests that. Usually it'll come with a grid, and hopefully it will also come with a detailed report of what kind of breaking down those skills. And so that is highly sensitive information about your student. So you would want to make sure that the teacher is requesting that from parents where applicable. I love that there's so many questions are coming in. I think, Marilyn, what we're going to do is continue on because we're going to run out of time. We have a lot more to do. Yeah. And I'm going to record some of these questions or respond in written format to the chat. And then if anything's really pertinent when we do our discussion closer to 12 o'clock, we can continue this really good discussion and dive more.
I love the engagement, but yes, we do have some more material to get to. Okay, so what we did is we made this handy little checklist for you. So it goes through the steps on how to conduct an assessment. And you can actually check this off. It's a really good practice to start checking this off yourself because eventually you will just be able to do this. But right now we want to make sure that you followed each and every step. So this is in the shared folder for you. So 1, do you have your materials ready to go? Sorry, I hit my table and it shook there. Some of the assessments will have more materials than others. So you might need pictures, you might need objects. Some you might not need specific materials for the actual assessment, but do you have a pen? Do you have a pencil? Do you have your data sheet? Do you have your ABLLS book with the actual phrase on, or the instruction on how to do the assessment? Those are all part of your materials. You want to make sure that you have all that ahead of time so that you don't need to scramble during your assessment because that will skew your data as well. Do you have the data sheets ready to go? So if you do access the ABLLS skill acquisition guides, they have data sheets in them. If not, there are data sheets online on our Google Plus of just regular probe sheets. We are providing you with the data sheets for the top 10, and eventually we might have further data sheets to come for you. We are kind of working on that on the side. So do you have a reinforcer? Make sure you have a reinforcer for the student because you are going to reinforce them after the fact for complying with your demands, not whether or not they were correct, but that they came over and sat with you or that they listened to you for the 2 or 3 minutes that you took to do the assessment. So bring the student over or approach the student depending on the assessment. Show the student the choice of preferred activities. Give them a couple seconds to choose something. Okay, first we're going to do a little bit of work, then you get blank, your preferred activity. Deliver the instruction. So sit down, say that's your instruction. Give no prompts. Observe the response. So did they sit down? Take your data. Give no feedback. If they did not sit down and they walked away, great, fine. That's what part of the assessment is right now. Do not give praise for anything that's related to your actual assessment. So not, oh, come back and sit, or like, oh, you sat down, great job. It's thanks for being here, here's your toy, or thanks for doing your work, here's your toy. Make sure it's very generic that you're reinforcing. You did some work, here you go. Make sure that you know your student and how many actual skills they can do before accessing reinforcement. You've got an early learner, you're looking at maybe 1 to 5 responses that they're capable of before they are actually just going to leave. And it's not a real true assessment because it's more of an instructional control issue at that point. It's that they can't sit and do 25 questions, right? So make sure you know your learner and what their schedule of reinforcement is before you actually start your assessment. And then repeat this. So the reason we say an ABLLS assessment takes so long is not because the assessment itself takes so long. If you could theoretically sit with a child and do this, you could probably bang it out in a few hours, but we're not suggesting that you do a full assessment and do this for hours on end. You would want to put specific chunks in your day where you're planning to assess, have your specific goals that you're planning to assess during that chunk and plan for that and assess them, and then move on to something else and then come back to it again. Because you're going to get mostly no's if you continue to probe the student over and over and over, because they are just going to be done with an assessment. So we are suggesting that you take small chunks of time, make sure you have all your materials ready to go, and then complete your assessment during that time. And again, this will take a long time if you're assessing a lot of skills. So today what we're really suggesting is that you use this to probe 1 or 2 skills at a time, teach those skills, and then you can use it again to teach those next, or probe those next skills and teach those next skills. So really what we're suggesting today is to use this tool to baseline your current skills you're trying to teach. If they do not have it, move backwards in the progression of skills. If you get 3 or 4 skills back and they still don't have it, you're back there teaching, not all the way up here, right? So we're suggesting that you use this as an assessment tool for 1 or 2 skills at a time to help with the progression, not to do a full ABLLS assessment right now. That's probably not feasible. All right, so I have a little quick let's review here. So the following are steps to completing an ABLLS assessment, except 1, have a preferred activity available. 2, record your data. 3, reinforce each response. Or 4, give no feedback specific to correct or incorrect responses. So which one is except?
Most people are saying, everyone so far is saying 3.
Awesome. So we're not reinforcing each response, right? We're not saying yes or no that they got it. We are just reinforcing the behavior around the completing of assessment. Okay, so we are going to jump into these 10 starter skills because I'm aware here that it's almost 11 o'clock and we do have 10 skills to go through. We may end up skipping a few skills, but they will all be in the slides, and there are videos for specific ones here that we will go through. So we chose these 10 starter skills. 1, because a lot of these skills are behavioral cusp. Once they have this skill, they'll be able to learn other skills. 2, because we saw these skills being targeted a lot in classrooms or within the schools, so we thought we will help you assess these skills because we do see them being taught fairly often. 3, because a lot of these skills, especially in the kindergarten and in the assessment classes that we work on, will help not only you, but the teacher with, so imagine a student can now wait, this is going to help the rest of the class. If they can choose on independently, this is going to help the rest of the class. These are some skills that will help everything run a little bit smoother in time and help you build on other skills. So waiting without touching stimuli. So can the student wait? Following an instruction in a routine, selecting objects or pictures, so that's receptively identifying them. Spontaneous requests with item present, so can they ask for what they want when the item is in front of them. Labeling common objects or pictures, so you'll see the ones that we put beside them because the skill is assessed very similar, and it's a similar skill, it's just object to pictures. Spontaneous imitation of others, so this is not necessarily a skill that we would teach, and we'll go a little bit further into that, but it is a skill we want to assess if they have, because if they can spontaneously imitate others, we know that that is a behavioral cusp. They will then start to imitate others, and we can reinforce that, and we can use that as a prompt. Independent leisure skills, so we know that, you know, come grade 1, students are going to have some independent time when they're done their work or when the EA is working with someone else in the class. This is a great skill to have. Returning greetings, so we do see a lot of greeting programs in schools because it's a very socially significant goal. We want to remind you that we start with returning greetings, not initiating greetings. It's a lot easier to teach someone to say hi when someone's already said, hey Jen, how are you? We can easily prompt you to say hi versus to actually contrive the motivation for her to want to socially initiate that skill and then to prompt it to happen. Sits appropriately in a small group. So even M1, I think at the biggest part is a 2 to 3 ratio or something, and it's a small group of 5. So we want to make sure they have that before we even start and can sit in a larger group. And then shoes on and shoes off. This is something that, you know, would we target it as a skill? Maybe, maybe not, but every child changes their shoes 4 or 5 times a day at school, from recess to gym, their boots in and outs from arriving at school, so we wanted to make sure that we went through this. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through each skill. We're going to tell you what the entry point to the KP program is. We're going to tell you which domain in the ABLLS it is, how you would measure it, and then how you would take the data. Then we're going to go through of examples in your classroom, and then for maybe 3 or 4 of the skills, we actually have a video showing you what this would look like. Please go ahead and answer or ask any questions in the comment box as we go, and Jen will answer them or save them if they can be saved. And we'll start from here. So weights without touching stimuli is an A8. So this is a very early goal. So this is being able to wait without crying, without grabbing the item, and without having to tell them repeatedly to wait. So this is an independent skill. So the entry point to KP would be demonstrates independence, self-regulation, willingness to take responsibility in learning and other endeavors. So thank you to Louise for helping us with all of these as well. So this is an early basic learning skill in the ABLLS assessment. That's the domain it is. So it's your A to P, I believe, or A to L? A to L skills. How you would measure this. So this is trial by trial once a week. So in a clinical environment, yes, we would take 30 data trials on this a day. But what we're asking you to take is a few trials once a week. And then we would graph this using a percent graph. And again, we're going to provide you with all of these data sheets, but we're not going to go into what each data sheet looks like right now, just for lack of time. Okay, so weights without touching stimuli. When the instructor is attempting to engage the student in learning at a table while seated at the floor or standing near materials for an activity, the student will wait calmly. So here are some examples. That's the good part to look at. I would always look at that example section. It's going to give you scenarios that you can set up yourself to assess these skills. Sit calmly with hands on the table in front of them, not touching the materials. So maybe you've set out a craft. Can they sit there without grabbing the glue for the time needed before you start giving your instruction to actually touch it? So what we're going to do is we're just going to go through these a little bit quickly because we are kind of lacking time. But what you can do is on each skill, you can look these up in your ABLLS, and what we did was we copied the whole row for you so that it's in here, and it's also in the slides that you can go back and look at. And again, feel free to ask questions along the way, but we just want to make sure we get through all the 10. So this is the important part. Why is this an important skill to have and an important skill to assess? So waiting in line to go to the gym, outside, the library, waiting for your turn to pick a song, waiting for someone to open up their snack containers, or you're sitting there and you want your snack, miss, open my snack, right? Waiting for your turn on the iPad, waiting for your turn while the smartboard comes on and it loads, waiting for someone to help you with your zipper or unzip it or do up your coat, waiting for the bus, the van, a parent to pick them up, waiting at the playground for someone else to go down the slide or for someone else to get off the swing, waiting your turn in a game, waiting your turn to wash your hands. So these are all examples of waiting. So they're not all examples of A8, but A8 is a very minimal kind of waiting skill, and we build on that. Can you think of any other examples in the chat box of when your student might have to wait in a day and how important this skill is? I am telling you, I have written so many behavior plans, and each and every one of them has some form of a waiting component in it, because this is a skill that is lacking with a lot of the students we work with because it hasn't been implicitly taught. We often see learning or waiting kind of learned through just social reinforcement, right? When my daughter waits, I'm like, hey, waiting for mommy, thank you so much. And she's like, oh, I did such a great job, right? But she was so socially motivated to wait. Any good examples coming up there, Jen?
There are a lot of good ones coming up. I just want to point out that we're not going to go into detail of how to teach these skills. We're only going into detail how to probe them. If you want more information how to teach them, we do have Google Plus videos of how to teach them. So the videos we're going to show you today are not how to teach. It's just how to do the baseline assessment. But again, these books, which I put the link up higher in the chat box, this duo here has lesson plans for you to teach you how to teach it if you don't know how to teach the skill, okay? But this is just examples of times that we might want to be targeting it in the classroom or at the school, and we're only going to talk about the assessment. So for some examples of waiting to get a drink of water, waiting for the bathroom, fire drills, cafeteria line, when the lockdown is over, wait until the lockdown is over, right?
Yes.
So true. I'm not good at waiting for that. So all of these things. So we have a lot of questions coming in about teaching it. So like, is it okay to teach waiting with a squishy toy? Again, refer to your lesson plan because we're not going to get into that today. We do have a Google Plus video specifically on waiting, I believe, Marilyn?
Yeah.
So some of these skills we do, and it's a 5-minute video and it teaches you kind of the bare minimum to know about how to teach it. So we're not going to get into those questions today. Waiting for someone's attention. Oh, that's such a big one, right? It's really, really hard to wait your turn.
Waiting to talk your turn on Zoom, right? So yeah, just a lot of great examples. Thank you guys. But all of these times are when students have to wait in a day. And think about sometimes we're asking students to wait for like 3 to 5 minutes. And if we do a baseline and they can't wait for 3 seconds, that's what tells us that maybe we need to go back and start waiting at a very much lower level, right? And that's often what happens is students are just being asked to wait at a time that they're just not there yet. They haven't learned that skill entirely yet.
And it's important to note as well with a skill like waiting, we understand that it is difficult when you have certain profiles of student for them to wait. It's more difficult for some kiddos to wait. The kiddos with diagnoses of ADD or something might have a more difficult time waiting. What's important to have as an open discussion as well, or a thought process is the world, unfortunately, in some ways, will not adapt around your student. So when they're in line, they're not going to skip the line at Costco because they have waiting issues. They're not going to skip the line anywhere because they have waiting issues, or they're not going to be called earlier at the dentist because they have waiting issues. So really the onus is on us as educators to teach the student how to wait, how to adapt to the world that they're in versus trying to get the world to adapt to them and just never have them wait. Sometimes to avoid challenging behavior, that's our go-to. We'll just let them go into the gym first. Let them be first in line. Just avoid. And we sometimes will try to use a diagnosis as an excuse to do that, but we don't want you to do that. We want you to teach the student the skills that they're lacking, because you're right, it's an essential goal, Shannon. It's essential for the student to be socially significant in the world, to learn a skill like this. So it's critical to assess.
And remember, Jen as well, we are still teaching some high school students how to wait at 3 to 5 second intervals, right? So we have to remember that this skill, the earlier you can teach it, the better. That's why we put it as our #1 skill. So I am going to show you this quick video. It's only about a minute. So Jen is the instructor giving the instruction for Hazel, my little bumpkin here, to wait for the juice. So let's see whether she can do it, and watch to see, does Jen prompt, does Jen reinforce the specific skill of waiting, and does she give a clear instruction? Okay.
Hazel, do you want orange juice or lemonade? Orange. Hazel, do you want orange juice or lemonade? Orange juice, okay, you just need to wait. Jensen, what do you want, sweetie? Orange juice. There you go. Hannah, what would you like? Orange juice.
So Hazel will get a yes for waiting because she was able to wait without touching the stimuli. So.
Okay, so do you see how Jen gave the clear instruction? Yep, you need to wait. And then she went on to give the other students something. She had her timer. I had my timer as I was taking the data. Sometimes you have to have 2 people when it's multiple students involved. And then from there, she gave Hazel the juice. She goes, here you go, sweetie. So she didn't say, great waiting. I love how you waited. She just simply said, here you go. I took the data for her, and it was a plus or a yes that she was able to wait the time that we had in the pre-assessment. So does that make sense to everybody? We good? No questions, Jen?
Nope, we're good.
Okay. So our next one is follow instructions in a routine situation. So again, throughout the day, this is inevitable. This is something that just has to happen, right? So the KP entry point is communicates with others in a variety, sorry, I just have to move my little box here, in a variety of ways for a variety of purposes and a variety of contexts. So you can look this goal up in your ABLLS. It's your C7 goal. So can they follow a routine instruction in the day? So follows instructions in a routine. So again, look at your examples. This is your best thing to look at. After using the toilet, the student will follow directions to wash their hands. Wash your hands, it's a routine thing. It's one direction, right? And then look at your criteria. 3 or more activities with only partial physical prompts, 3 or more with a model and no physical prompts, at least 3 with only 1 verbal or pointing prompt, and at least 3 activities without prompts at all. This is where we're aiming for, but your student might be at 1 or they might be at 0 right now. What we want to make sure is that if we do have to use a prompt here, because this is a different one, this is one that you could prompt during your assessment, but you have to record the type of prompt that's needed, because in your criteria, prompting is allowed for levels 1, 2, and 3. So that's a little bit more difficult one. So that's why it's really important to read your criteria to see what you're looking for. So for example, if you said, go wash your hands, 1, 2, 3, they don't. Only a partial physical prompt, so maybe a little pat on the back. Do they go? 1, 2, 3. No. Stop your trial and then go back and try it again with multiple trials throughout the day to get you enough data. But we want to make sure that we don't go on to physically prompt them more or reinforce, because this one can be a lot more difficult when there is some prompting involved. Would you agree, Jen?
Yes, and I also want to point out that proximity to the student really matters in an assessment, and it really matters in teaching. We have an awful lot of students who do not perform skills independently unless someone is very close to them. So when because they're used to that being the stimuli in their environment that evokes an independent response. So if you say wash your hands and you're standing 2 feet from the student is more likely going to do that than when you're 10 feet away, because they know you're not going to be right there to swoop in with a prompt, right? Yeah. And so it's very important when you're doing an assessment to get away from your student, because so many times when I'm involved with a case, the student is very prompt dependent on having the adult there, both to physically prompt, verbally prompt, gesturally prompt. But when they're not doing that, oftentimes the educator is reporting on that skill as an independent skill. But if I say to that educator, go 6 feet away, fade yourself out, pretend you're not the EA or the teacher that's here, pretend they just have to finish, go to the bathroom and see if they know what to do next, or if they can do the whole sequence without you there, and it all falls apart. So that is not an independent skill if your student is only able to do it with you right beside them, even if you're not doing other types of prompting. So that's a critical thing to keep in mind, both with teaching as well as assessment.
And when you're doing assessment, you want to look at what the other students that you're trying to achieve are doing. So for example, if you said, you know, little Billy comes out of the bathroom and you're like, go wash your hands, and then you walk away and you go do 3 other things with 3 other students, did Billy go wash his hands? If he did, then that's the level of independence and that's the level of assessment you're looking for your child to do, not like being kind of hovering over them like Jen said, because we want it to look as natural as the other kids did when they did theirs eventually. Okay. So here's some examples of when you would use C7 in your classroom. Wash your hands, line up, sit at the carpet for circle, get your lunch bag, put your shoes on, put your jacket on, flush the toilet, open your backpack. Does anyone have any other examples? This is used at such a high rate, right? Your whole day is packed with routine situations that we're receptively asking our students to do. If you feel like you are fully prompting or prompting each and every time, this is a great skill to baseline, see where your student is at, and then actually start teaching this to fade those prompts out, because eventually, how lovely would it be that you just said, okay, go to the carpet, and your student went, right? Any great
examples coming in, packing your backpack at the end of the day, putting your books away, getting your stuff on to get ready for recess. So those are really good examples. I do want to point out as well that if you baseline this and your student does not have C7, remember, we're going to go backwards. We're going to try to see what are those earlier receptive skills that your student might be lacking. Do they have C1, C2, C3? And not that you necessarily always have to teach C1 first, then C2, then C3, but there are some critical, just general receptive skills in terms of listening to someone else that your student might be lacking, that might be more helpful to start with. So remember to go backwards.
Like before in our progression, remember that follow an instruction to do an enjoyable event. So if they can't follow an instruction to do something really fun when they're engaged in it, then likely we're going to want to work on that a little bit before we get to C7, which is typically not the most fun things when they're routine situations. Okay, next we have select objects or pictures. So the KP entry point to this is demonstrates literacy behavior that enables beginning readers to make sense of a variety of contexts. So this is when you're starting to read. There's picture books. You've got lots of items in your picture box. We see this happening at circle time all the time. Can you find this? Can you show me the little girl who's wearing the red coat? So this is a learning skill that goes towards that goal. So you can see it selects one of 6 or more objects on a table, or selects one of 6 or more pictures on a table. So again, if your student does not have this skill, you're going to want to start to look at the earlier C skills. 1 of 3 selects 1 of 2. If they don't have those, maybe we have to go back and look at those B skills, those visual performance skills. Can they match these items? Can they match object to object? Can they match picture to picture? If not, then that's maybe where we're starting for those students. But remember where these goals are leading to. So pointing to a picture in a book at circle time, get your pencil, paper, and receptively be able to identify those items, right? Sit on your chair. They have to receptively be able to identify that it's a chair before they can go sit on that chair, right? Asking a peer for an item, well, they have to know what those items receptively are. So this is a skill that's leading up to that. If you say, go get your hat, well, maybe the student went over to the area, but then they're like, what's my hat, right? So all of these skills are building on further skills. So all of these receptive, being able to find objects and find pictures, are going to help you build these other skills. Don't go on the road. Well, if we don't know what a road is, maybe it's a matter of I'm not non-compliant to your rule of don't go to the road. I don't know how to receptively identify the road. Bring the ball out for recess. They get out there and they don't have anything. And you're like, you didn't bring the ball. They're like, what's a ball, right? So all of these receptively identifying objects and pictures are going to help you build into all of these other skills that seem so natural throughout your day. Are there any great comments coming up there, Jen, for this one?
Let's see. So people are saying, you know, bring me the color of something. So be careful with that one, because that is 2 receptive skills in one. So bring me the blue cup is a different skill than what we're talking about. See, 16, 17 is just give me the cup when it's in comparison to a computer and a mug.
Yes, the color is 24, so a little bit higher up there, right?
So that's an interesting point, Marilyn. It is more important for your student to ask for a cup than it is to be able to label a color. Because if I can receptively identify a cup, eventually learn to tact or label a cup, then I can ask for a cup when I need a cup. Colors, it's much more difficult. I've worked with kiddos that can say yellow and red and blue, but they can't label anything else in their environment, and they certainly can't mand for what they need. So it's unfortunate sometimes that we teach skills that are not socially significant to the student. It doesn't matter that Billy can say blue if Billy can't say no or stop or give me, you know, water or something else. Okay, so receptive identification, going to the safe place. So Erin, that's a good idea. We're talking about objects and pictures. Going to a place is a different receptive skill. So this is the tricky part about ABLLS, is that it's very specific. So C16 is very specifically talking about objects, and C17 is talking about pictures. So pictures of locations, for example, if you're going to teach a student to touch the picture of the classroom versus touch a picture of the safe place versus touch the picture of a restaurant, that's a totally different ABLLS goal. It's a higher ABLLS goal. It's a more difficult goal. Bring me the red bin. Again, we don't want to, that's a skill where it involves 3 different skills. It involves going and retrieving something, so following an instruction, which is a different C goal, a color, which is a different C goal. So how we would baseline and teach C16 and 17 is materials on a desk or materials in a play space. Touch the marker versus the pencil, not touch red versus yellow, but touch the marker versus the pencil. Touch.
And it sounds like they're giving examples similar to our examples. And what we were saying in our examples are, these are skills that selecting a picture and selecting an object would lead up to. So if that's the case, you guys are definitely giving examples of how show me the duck would lead up to go get the duck and bring it to me, 100%. So I think that was a little bit of the confusion, because what you're reading, I'm like, oh, they are very similar to ours. So all of your examples are good examples of what C16 and 17 would lead up to. However, it's not an exact example of C16 and 17, which we didn't give you either, to be fair. So an example of C16 would be, there's 3 or well, there's 6 for C16. So there's 6 objects on the table, and you say, find the cup, and they find the cup. But all the examples that you're giving are definitely why we would need the student to know how to find the cup or to find the picture of the cup. Does that make sense? Okay, I hope
Yes,
it kind of clarified. No, I don't. I think it was just a confusion on our part of, we said give examples of C16, 17, but we didn't truly give them either. We gave examples of why it's such an important goal. So yes, all of your examples were absolutely reasons why we would teach it, but they're not specific targets.
So if you are teaching, though, all of those different types of goals, it's important to go backwards, right? Again, in the progression of skills.
Absolutely. All right, so we do have a quick little picture of me probing some C17 with my little Hazel here. And again, this was difficult. You'll notice that she got most of them. I had a hard time finding pictures that she didn't know what they were, even at 2. So we were kind of going through the box trying to find them all, but you will see how I do check and see, do I give a clear instruction to touch the picture or find the picture, and do I reinforce it for each one?
Okay, next we're going to do C17. We're going to do receptive pictures. So can she touch the picture when I say the word? I'm not going to take data this time. I'm going to let you guys take the data, and I'm going to remember not to reinforce her when she picks the correct one. All right. Can you find bubbles? Okay. And let's see. Looks like it's some different ones. Where's the bike? You're doing a good job sitting. Hazel, can you find the burger? Are you so good at sitting? Yeah. You are. Where's the frog? Can you show me hands in your basket? Good job. Okay. Find the popcorn. Do you know where your nose is? You silly goose. That's good touching your nose. I'm just doing a little trial in between to give her a distraction and give her some reinforcement. Find bubbles. Okay, last one. Okay, show me crisscross. Good girl. Hey, where's the pool? I love that you were sitting. Say bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Oh, it kills me to remember how tiny she was. That's my now 4.5-year-old. So what I did was give clear instructions. I made sure as much as possible to vary them. So show me, can you find, where is that? So that she's not just like, find pool, find bike. I will criticize myself for my therapist voice. I'm sorry that comes out in me sometimes. Where is the bike? So I have to try to work on my tone to be more neutral, because I mean, that's very clearly an assessment, and students can sort of pick up on that as well. I didn't reinforce her for, yeah, you touched the bike, good job. But I did throw in a little couple other things in there to reinforce her for. So like, put your hands in your basket, so I could just reinforce her. Crisscross, so I could reinforce her. Because she was very little at this point, so she wasn't going to be able to sit there with no reinforcement, but I reinforced the behaviors around sitting. So at the end, I said, I love that you sat with me. She functions perfectly well on social reinforcement, neurotypical 2-year-old. I'm happy to answer mommy. So I didn't need to have any tangible. She actually thought this was a game, so it was hilarious. So I didn't need to have any tangible reinforcers with me for the sitting portions or anything like that. But what we want to make sure is we don't prompt. Again, Jen and I had difficulties making these videos. We were trying to get ones that they would error on so that we could show that we didn't correct the error either. But both of our children were responding at time rates of all these pictures. So we decided to just show that the SD is clear, it's varied, and that there's no reinforcement for the skill being done. Are there any questions on that one, Jen, or is it going all right?
No, everyone thinks she's too adorable for words. What I was doing, Marilyn, was writing the target and writing what I would record as the baseline data. So hopefully I was correct. Feel free to jump in if I'm not. Sometimes it was hard for me to see the picture, what the picture
Yeah, and
was.
I had my data over on the side, which I did criticize myself after we made these videos, but honestly, these took us so long to do because we kept trying to get them all like at the same time. But I do have my data over on the side. It's just not clear that I'm taking it. So I make sure that I take my data on each and every trial. I'm not going to, I mean, she got them right, but I'm not going to be able to remember at the end which ones they got right, which ones they got wrong. If you are probing multiple pictures or objects though, what you can do is have a little right-wrong pile. But the problem with that is you don't know what order they were in. So you want to make sure that you take your data in every single trial, just a little plus or minus, just circling your yes, so that you have your exact data.
So I do have a question that came in, Marilyn. It was about the student and pairing. So the child's attention would be different depending on the prober, and would this affect data and how is it accounted for? So it's a very good point. This is why we want multiple different people to probe on different days, because if your student has the skill of touching the picture when you're asking, so receptively identifying pictures, so that's C17, then they should be able to do it with a novel prober. When you're doing assessments for students, a big part of that is to say, hi, sweetie, I'm going to ask you some questions. If they're at a level where they can understand that, my name is Jen. I'm going to ask you some questions today, and it's going to be about 10 minutes. And then when I'm all done, so that if they don't know me, they still know me as a friendly face. But it's also important not to just have people probing skills that are 100% familiar with the student, that the student's 100% familiar with, because a lot of these skills, that's what happens that sometimes feeds into generalization issues, is Billy can only answer it if it's his teacher probing. If it's someone else, Billy's not showing the skill, so when he goes to the next grade, we're having some big problems with generalization. So that's why with the ABLLS, we want different days as much as possible to be different assessors. Because if it's a yes every time Marilyn does an assessment, but it's a no every time I do an assessment, that's a tricky thing to say. It says, okay, he technically has the skill, but we may need to revisit the skill to explicitly teach it to different people. Because it doesn't matter if he can do the skill with one person or two people. That's a fault in teaching. That's an error in teaching. We have to make sure that this skill is generalized across many different people, many different classrooms, many different stimuli. So even things he's never seen before, we want to make sure that he can evoke those skills.
Sometimes, I mean, depending on your level of learner, I know Jen and I did an assessment last year with one of our assessment learners. And I mean, the assessment was mostly A skills, but it was pretty quick because she didn't know me very well. She knew you at a relative level. But what we did first was we did a lot of pairing with her. We played with her for about a half hour. We were like, we're fun. You want to come over to us? We've got all your cool stuff. Look at us. And then she'd crawl over and we'd do a quick assessment because we had all our materials. We were ready. We knew what we were assessing. I was taking data. Jen was doing it, or vice versa. And I'm like, okay, my next school is this. I'm super fun. I'm super fun. She'd come over, assess it, and then she'd walk away. And we were like, okay, great. So you want to make sure that you do some pairing. We talked a lot about that yesterday. You don't want to just be this kind of cold, stern person who comes in to do this assessment. You do have to have some level of relationship with the child, and it's going to depend on the child of what level of pairing you need to do in order to be able to do this assessment. But I mean, often we can play with a child for 10 or 15 minutes. They're like, this dude's fun. We're like, yeah. And then they're like, okay, I'll sit with you for a minute. And again, we mentioned yesterday, I would not encourage you to be doing ABLLS assessments on students with high serious problem behavior right now. Please speak to your behavior consultant or your behavior analyst, kind of get that under control a little bit, and then we can go further into an ABLLS assessment. But not the time to be doing these deep assessments. You might assess a skill or two, but okay. Spontaneous request with item present. So you will very rarely come into contact with one of us behavior analysts that we don't have some form of a manding goal. And so one of the first things we're going to probe is this: can they request an item when it's present in front of them? So it's around them, they can see the item, can they say ball? Or use their PEC to ask for ball, or use their augmentative device for ask for ball. So the way this entry goes to the KP is communicate with others in a variety of ways for a variety of purposes and in a variety of contexts. So again, can you ask multiple people, right? In your examples, can you ask multiple people for that cookie? Can you ask for a variety of items? So look at your criteria. It starts with 2 specific items with it present, and it builds up to 10 or more. We would never stop at 10, but this is our criteria for at least knowing, can they do this? So we do have a note here that requesting is a verbal operant, and this is what we're going to call manding. So you're going to hear us say, we're going to do some manding. We're going to start a manding program. This is what we're probing, is can they request for that item? So again, for this, it's items and activities. It is not other types of man. So as we showed you earlier, the F domain is pretty high, right? So lots of different forms of request. So we're not probing things here like help, open, no, like requesting someone to stop, requesting for a break. These are specific tangible items right now, or activities that F5 would be testing for. So examples: one-word mans, carrot, marker, iPad, book, Lego, water, bubble, sing, look. Manding using carrier phrases. So again, this is not all F5, but these are examples of why F5 is going to be really important in your classroom. Can I have a carrot? I want the marker. Can I play with the iPad? Eventually, having the F5 skills is going to lead into the ability to say, where is it, right? That's a request for information. It's going to build into skills such as, I need a break, right? That's requesting someone to stop, or requesting that you leave the room for a little bit. Requesting for item to stop, I don't want that, right? That's a request for it to stop as well. So think of how important these skills are in your day-to-day life, that how many times in a day you need some form of a break. You need an item, or you need information. Take data on yourself for 15 minutes and see how many of those things that you say are actually requests. It is incredible. Most of our conversations are either requests for information or requests for attention. And so if they don't have the simple skill of asking, and it's not a simple skill, but the early skill, sorry, of asking for an item when it's present in front of them, we will not be able to build on all of those other things that are going to form a conversation, that are going to get into carrier skills. And those then build on all those social skills, right? So this is honestly, this and weighting are 2 of the most important goals. If your student cannot do these, please assess them and please see where they're at, and please target them, because these are very important goals. Okay, so Jen, if you don't mind, I am going to skip this and allow people to watch it, only because it's 5 minutes, and I know we have, this is the sweetest little Charlotte. She is requesting items, and when you watch this video, I highly recommend that you watch it later. Jen's trying to entice her, and you'll see that Charlotte, I think she's 2.5 or 3 here, is being like, can you take the dress off? And like, how does this, like, she's requesting all these other things. Mommy, look, she's got all these other amazing mans, and Jen's like trying to just do like, doll.
And those are all more complex mans than what I was trying to target, right?
Yeah.
So I was trying to target, like, will she ask for Elsa? And
Yeah.
instead, she's asking for help, which is a different goal. I think it's F11 is help. She's requesting missing items, like where's Anna's shoe. She's requesting my attention, mommy look. So all of those are different types of requesting that are different ABLLS goals. But I had to stay focused on, typically when I'm assessing this with a student, they don't have a lot of requesting skills. So
Yeah.
it was really tricky for me to be balancing. But what we'll do, Marilyn, I know we have the PDF slides in that Google folder. In order for them to access the video, we'll have to also put the slide deck, a copy of the slide deck in there, so that you can at another time go through this. And when we post this on the YouTube channel for our Google Plus community, we'll also reference, maybe in the notes there are the comments, that the slide deck will be accessible in the Google Plus community, so that people who are watching the video who are missing some of these at a later date can still access them, because I know we'll probably skip maybe the rest or most of the rest, which is okay, because as long as you're understanding that the The baseline is no prompting, no reinforcement. It can be very structured. Honey, you need to come and sit with me and we're going to do some things. You can reinforce other skills like nice sitting or cooperating or things like that. If you can't do a baseline assessment in a sitting format because your student, maybe their baseline for sitting is 30 seconds. So Marilyn and I have oftentimes followed a student around a room, and when they're already engaged in something, we might approach and get a quick probe in, and then we'll retreat again. So sometimes you have to be very creative depending on the level of your student.
If you're just dipping your toes in, start with the learner that you have who's pretty cooperative, who's willing to kind of sit with you for a few minutes. It's not that it's more valuable, but it's just a really good starting place for you to kind of get your toes wet. Let me tell you, lying on the floor doing an ABLLS assessment, that's a different skill, right? So you will develop that eventually, and you know, the earlier learners that you worked with, you'll definitely have to maybe develop some of those skills. But start with kind of your learner who is more willing to sit with you even for a minute. Start with some of those goals that you can just say, okay, I've got my materials ready, I'm going to assess this, I've got it. And the learner who's pretty cooperative, and then you can definitely build into assessing some other learners as well, but kind of telling you to dip your toes in with more cooperative learners to start is sometimes an easier way. Okay, so labels common objects, how it meets the KPE is communicates with others in a variety of ways, for a variety of purposes, and a variety of contexts. And it also leads to demonstrates literacy behavior that enables beginning readers to make sense of a variety of texts. So this makes sense because we are labeling reinforcers. So if they want to ask for what they want, can they actually label them? Can they label pictures in a book at circle time? Can they label their snack items? So if they want something specific, they're like, oh, look at that, I have this. That's, again, leading to a social skill. If the teacher asks them where they want to sit, they can label that place, right? They can label the item they want from a peer if they're playing. Eventually, this is a communication and a conversational skill. What are you looking at, Billy? It's like, oh, I'm looking at the dog and the cat and the mitts and my favorite toy. Where are you hurt? So eventually this leads to labeling your body parts. So if the child's crying and they're clearly upset, where are you hurt? My knee, they can label that, right? So again, these are not examples of all G8. I want to make that clear, the same, or not G8, it's this G8. Sorry, my thing's in the middle of it. Yes. But they are examples of where this leads to, why it's so important. So what we're going to do is we're just going to tell you what the next goals are. Unfortunately, we're not going to have a lot more time to go through them because we are kind of getting low on time and we want to make sure we answer all your questions. But I will at least label these as we go through, and I encourage you to kind of come back if you have a minute and look through them yourselves. So we talked about this a little bit earlier. D26, spontaneously imitates actions of others. Would we teach this goal? Maybe not. We might not target it for specific teaching, but if they don't have this skill, it is telling me that we need to go back and explicitly teach some of the imitation skills because that is going to help that learner in the future. Again, here are some ways imitating peers is going to be helpful, or imitating the teacher is going to be helpful in their learning, and examples of how they'll happen throughout the day. So next we have independent indoor activities. So we know in a school setting especially, the students are going to have some independent playtime. That just might mean a minute while you go and grab some other materials. It might mean they play independently for a few minutes while you work with your other student, and you know, especially EAs who I see working with 2 or 3 students in a group, you might have to have them do an independent activity for a minute while you do something else with your other learners, right? When you finish something early, when you're said, oh, it's free time in the gym, go play, right? So this is how that independent learning or activities is going to lead into all of these other skills. Oh, that's a cute video too. You should watch that one. So return greetings. I know we talked a little bit briefly about this, but we teach returning greetings before we teach initiating greetings. So what we want to probe is, can they even return a greeting when someone says hi to them? So how is this going to help the student, and how is this going to be seen throughout the day? When a peer or a staff in the morning says hi to them, when they're walking in the hallways, when they get out to recess and they see new peers, when their parents or the van driver comes, these are all examples of how they're going to need to return greetings, right? This is a very socially significant goal. Once and only once we teach returning, then we start to get into initiating, because the returning goals is actually going to build some motivation for initiating if they get enough reinforcement from those people. Okay, sits in a small group. So this is pretty self-explanatory. There are hundreds of examples where they sit in a small group, right? So circle time, library, at snack, waiting to go outside. You might be sitting in a small group and the teacher's telling them some things. Tabletop activities, gym instruction, they might have to sit to get their instructions. Small group activities where they have to sit in a group, small group learning. This happens throughout the day. So what we want to do is we want to assess this skill. I can't express the importance of this enough. We've seen goals where learners are to sit for 5 minutes. When I truly baseline, they're at 3 seconds. And so 5 minutes might be a really great goal long term, but we know our baseline says 3 seconds, so we're certainly not going to start at a 5-minute teaching goal. So that's where baseline is really going to help you. And it's going to lower some of your frustrations too. Sometimes when you're like, I've been teaching this for 2 months, what's going on? It's because he doesn't have some of those prerequisite skills, or we're just teaching that skill. Like he might have the prerequisite skills for sitting in a small group. He can sit on his bum. He can be appropriate near a peer, but he doesn't have the skill to sit for 5 minutes yet. And we're not going to be able to teach it at that level yet. Okay. Sorry, I'll be 1 second.
So the next one is shoes on and shoes off, and that's the last one that we have before we jump back to the training agenda.
Sorry, my computer almost died. I didn't want that.
That's okay. I thought that was happening, so I just wanted to jump in there.
So yeah, shoes on and shoes off, 100% this happens 4 or 5 times a day. We know that. You know, whether or not we would explicitly teach this goal, it's obviously going to be student specific, but there's lots of times in the day when this does in fact happen. So we want to make sure that if we're going to teach this, we're going to probe what parts of the skills they can do and teach from there. So I'll go through the last slide. Whew, that was really quick, eh? I'll go through the last slide and then we'll save the questions for that for the end, because I know that there'll probably be some questions about those as well. So we went through the whole part of the ABLLS so far. So what it is, why should we use it? How does it relate to the kindergarten assessment program? How does it relate to the kindergarten program? And again, we're saying kindergarten right now because chronologically this is the age that it refers to. But if you have students who do not have these skills, please use this as an assessment tool to assess those skills as well. As I've said, I have probed some of these skills in anyone from age 2 to age 18, right? So it doesn't matter about their chronological age. How to use this assessment, so we went really strongly into baseline versus teaching, right? So the baseline is no reinforcement, no prompting. It's structured or making sure we have all our materials that we need, because this is a true assessment. And then we went into the starter skills. So again, we didn't have enough time to go into them all, but I do encourage that you kind of go through and read them. It's an idea, it's a place to start. So you do not have to go home and assess those 10 skills. It's just some ideas of if your student doesn't have those 10 skills, we highly suggest baselining and possibly targeting those to teach before other skills. We consider those some really important skills in their day. Last but not least, we do have an IEP slide here. However, we're not going deeply into the IEP. We really suggest that you reach out to your IRT or reach out to your EdCon to help you if you need some IEP help on how to turn these goals or how to fit these goals within the IEP into the different sections of it. So it can be helped with your IEP in 3 ways. Help you identify where the student is at. So if you do a baseline and you realize this is where the student is at, it can then help you to build a goal that is, actually accurate for that student's current level. It can help you to identify some of the prerequisite skills. So if you were going to teach, for example, sitting at the table for 5 minutes or sitting at the carpet for 5 minutes, what are the prerequisite skills that you actually need to teach? 3 seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, up to a minute, etc. And it also gives you a specific tool to measure that skill. So remember we said earlier, although you are using this as an assessment tool, every time we take data, we are assessing again. So we're not taking data in that really natural way. We're taking data with an assessment. So the first time a trial we take data that day or that week, it's without prompting, without reinforcement, take your data, and then jump right back into that really, really natural teaching way, right? So it's kind of like that test. We're not prompting during the test, we're not reinforcing during the test, we're making sure they have that skill, and then we teach, and then we test them again. Then we teach, and then we test them again. So this is also how that can be really helpful for you, so that when you are taking that data, you're taking really accurate data that portrays whether the student can do it without a prompt or not. All right, so I hope you guys had a good time. We are going to stick around for questions, so don't worry about that. But dipping your toe in, wading in slowly, or diving right in, we really hope that you all dip your toe in, and we really feel that you have, because you came to this 2-day training. We thank you all for coming, because you know, you took 6 or 7 hours out of your day to watch this. And we love the engagement that everyone's going out and buying books. We're so excited about that. And we are happy to help you. You can always email Jen or I. Sometimes we're quicker than others to respond, but we will definitely help you. And we were highly reinforced by your ABLLS questions and by all your ABA questions. So feel free to reach out to us anytime if you need some support. If you want to conduct an ABLLS assessment within your school, please reach out to your behavior analyst or your behavior consultant if they're involved with that specific student. You can also reach out to your IRTs for some help if they're around to put your ABLLS goals into the IEP. Okay, so we have left you some resources here. So just, you know, the things that we use throughout the presentation, the Spec Ed report. We also put the Partington website here, which is how you would order an ABLLS or the skill acquisition. And I know Becky said that she also put those links in the chat box. Once the presentation is over, we will upload these videos to our YouTube channel, and we will also post on the Google Plus community with the specific links to get them, and we will put the videos in there as well. If you are not already part of it, we highly would love you to join our Google Plus community. We have over 1,000 people now, and we're so happy to engage with those 1,000 people. That is like our huge reinforcement every time you guys message us on there. There's lots of videos on how to teach using ABA. And if you have an opportunity to sign up for our level 3 at some point, that would be lovely, because what we really do in that is go into the ABCs of teaching. So once you baseline their skills, what's the most effective way to teach them using ABA if they're not currently learning them with other, you know, more traditional ways of teaching. And thank you for joining us. Here's our lovely Twitter account that Becky works so hard on every day, and she posts a lot of great learning opportunities there as well. So we would love for you to join us. So I'm going to stop sharing the presentation just so that I can see the chat box as well, but we will stick around for your questions.